The Pacers are off to Paris, and we are off to the mailbag to open it up and see what people want to know about the team right now. We'll get into tons of trade stuff, rotational questions, the future of certain players, and much more on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Monday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the currently in Europe Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, opening up the mailbag, very close to my last mailbag, only like a month and 10 days. I usually like to only do like 3 of these a year, so this is probably the closest proximity I've ever done. But the big gaps in games from the NBA Cup and this trip to Paris, the Pacers are on, made it a perfect time to hear from you guys what you want to know about or you want me to talk about. So perfect time to dive into this. Field questions on Twitter and Blue Sky. Thanks to everybody for submitting all sorts of stuff. Some trade stuff, of course, with the trade deadline being 3.5 weeks away, and plenty of other stuff about Paris, myself even, the team, rotations, all sorts of fun stuff like that. As a reminder, for those of you who have never listened to a Locked On Pacers mailbag before, I obviously read the question when I screenshot it and put it on my phone, but I try my best to look up nothing in advance about the question so that you can hear my answer and hear me think. I like that better when I listen to other podcasts that do this, but if you think that's worse and you prefer I really research all these hardcore in advance, I can do that. Let's get going. We have 7 questions today. First one from Mick Jost, Geeky Mick on Blue Sky, says, feels like this season's Pacers look a lot better than last season's when the team is at their best. Is that actually true, though? That is a good question. When I read this, I thought, I think a good way to look into this would be how many double-digit wins do they have, which is funny because they didn't have one for a long time this season, which was part of why everybody felt like they weren't playing very well, right? I think their first double-digit win of the year was that 11-point win in Chicago against Chicago. No, in Chicago, wherever it was. I was at it, so whatever. That's why it felt like a home game to me. Yeah, that was December 6th. I believe that was their first win by double digits the whole season, right? They had that week where they beat Washington, New Orleans, and Portland, but they were all ugly, close games. Maybe they beat the Wizards by 10. I can't remember. Regardless, for a while, it didn't feel like anything close to this, but what this question is asking is at their best, which has been basically since that Chicago game when this team has been playing very well and beating basically everybody by double figures. They're smoking opponents. And I think that is what makes this a valid question is all of their wins recently have been dramatic, and Basketball Reference, those of you who don't go to this page, if you go to a team's homepage during their current season, it has these little bars for their schedule. And it's a red bar that goes down if a team loses and a green bar that goes up if they win. And it goes up or down in size based on the number of points you win by. And basically since that game I'm describing, that win in Chicago, it's just all giant green bars well above, anything they had early in the season. They did beat the Wizards by 12. So that was their second double-digit win, that Chicago game. Regardless, they have just all their wins in January this month are by double digits, right? That Golden State game, they won by 12. The Detroit game, they won by 11. The Philadelphia game, they won by 13. All of them by double digits. Their last win that wasn't by double digits was a 9-point win over the Celtics, in which I believe the Celtics scored the last 2 points of the game. So very close to their last non-double-digit win coming ages ago, right? And so to answer the actual question, anecdotally, without looking up anything or saying all the things I just said, I do feel like, yes, their peak right now is better than their peak last year because they're better on defense, right? Last year was, almost comical in that it was dominant offense, insane, score a billion points. And, you know what? For the 25th defense, it's fine. We're so good on offense, it doesn't matter, right? They finished last year second on offense behind the historic Celtics, who still have a better offensive rating than anyone this season, but they were 2.2 points better than the third best offense, right? And that third best offense was 2.2 points better than the 13th best offense, right? Second to third, so Pacers to third was as big as third to 13th. This year, they're not that high on offense, right? They're creeping up. Pacers on the season now up to 11th after a sluggish start on the offensive end, but their defense is a lot better. They're out of the bottom 10 on the season in defense, and since they've been rolling, their last 15 games, for example, they're 8th in offense and 6th in defense. And that being top 10 in both is a lot of people's mark for a contender, and B, a much more consistent way to crush opponents. And so if you just ask me the question, don't look it up. What do you think? Is this year's team better than last year's team at their peak? I'd say yes. And the reasons for that are the reasons everybody thought this team could be better than last year, regardless of their roster changes, is that they have young players, most of whom got a tiny bit better at lots of stuff. And so once they started playing like the team from last year, it's all felt like that, even though it's not massive improvements and there's been steps back from McConnell and stuff along the way. Also having a full season of Siakam, but the start of the season can't be ignored. They sucked for 25 games, and that's why they sucked a stretch. But they were really bad for 25 games. So that's why I think this question is fascinating, because on the whole, I don't think like people can and should over-index on the more recent results, but like we can't just ignore that over half their season was still really bad. But to answer the question, yes, I do think the Pacers' peak this year is higher than their peak last year. Their peak last year, I would say, came maybe in the postseason, honestly. But really, in that late March stretch when Haliburton was finally playing well again and healthy, they were pretty good because that's when they had Siakam, right? Pre-Siakam, when Haliburton was at his best and the team was winning a good amount, they did not have Pascal. So, yes, I do think this year's team at their best is better than last year's. If you made me go through it numerically, I would go by double-digit wins, because the resume thing that I like to do, you could do last year or this year to describe that, if you know what I mean by they can beat anybody. They have beaten basically every good team they've played except for the Thunder. They did that last year, and they also lost to a lot of bad teams. Thank you, Mickey, for that one. Or Mikey. I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong. It's Mick. It's neither of those things. Thank you, Mick, for that one. AJ Reese at the AJ Reese on Twitter says, what question have you gotten the most in your career, AJ? Most of my questions are you, sir. First of all, much appreciated. We've joked about this in person before. Individual question. I mean, I've done mailbags on this podcast since 2017, so it's got to be a Myles trade thing, right? It's just how it goes. They're going to come back again this year, right? It's the way of life covering the Pacers, is you have to answer questions about Myles Turner trade stuff. His contract is kind of dictated it. He's in that sweet spot of player tradability, of not quite a star, but still pretty good, and interesting contract realities all the time. So I think it's probably that. I don't know. Or maybe something about coaching, even back to McMillan or Bjorkgren about, is this the right guy or what are they doing? Best opposing stadium I've been to. It's part 2 of AJ's question, with atmosphere and food in parentheses. Food, unquestionably, if you ask any media person what arena has the best food, they all pick Detroit. Little Caesars Arena. Oh my gosh. It is awesome. It is really great. Some players, even I've heard, like to eat there when they go there. Like they go get a plate and bring it back for their pregame meal. It is sublime. It is very good. Lots of, not to do too much inside baseball, but like lots of arenas just give us like a voucher to eat in the concourse, like with their concessions, which is fun. I like eating, those kind of things and seeing what the fans are all about, all that in those places. But yeah, Detroit clears. It's not even close. But anyone that like serves a buffet it's really great. Atmosphere. Look, I've been to lots of basketball stadiums in my life. I didn't go to MSG till last year when the Pacers were there for the playoffs. I've been to great college basketball venues and pro basketball venues. And I heard my whole life, it's different in MSG. The organ is different. It's just a cooler vibe. And it sounds like yapping, right? Blah, blah, blah. I've seen basketball. I know what it's like. And then I went to MSG and I'm like, okay, I get it. I am sorry for doubting the people who gassed up Madison Square Garden. It just is different. I can't even explain it. And I think it's totally fair. I've thought about this. Like I was there for the playoffs and massive games, right? Like those are by default atmosphere pluses, but I was also in TD Garden for the conference finals in Boston. I'd been to TD Garden before, but I was, it didn't feel, I liked MSG more than TD Garden. I like TD Garden too. So it just is different, right? There's just something special about it, and the noises and the way you go up instead of down when you go in. It's just very cool. 3, what favorite but random ex-Pacer would you add to this squad? His example, guys, were Edmund Sumner and Alize Johnson. Okay, in terms of what this team needs to be good, I don't know if this counts as a random Pacer because he started a decent amount. CJ Miles, I think, would be a great fit for what this team needs in terms of a wing shooter with volume, although he might be a little too small for the defensive end, but certainly 3-and-D-esque. Mike Dunleavy could be a shout, although he probably not serving the defensive side well enough either. But that kind of ilk of player would fit pretty well. They have a lot of ball handling already, even though it's not always like creating for others. Who cares? They have a lot of ball handling. They have plenty Now they have plenty of bigs because they have Thomas Bryant, but maybe that's the answer too, would be some center that, I always thought Goga was good, despite fans not thinking so. He'd be great on this team now. Random centers that I liked, man, that's harder. Kyle O'Quinn I thought was going to be good, and he wasn't that good for the Pacers, so I can't pick him. That's a tricky one. There's a lot of decent options. Maybe I'll pick somebody who's been on the pod before. How about Trevor Booker? Trevor Booker, the first player guest ever. I think my answer would be someone in the CJ Miles vein of skills. If I had to pick somebody, Bojan would be a fun one as well. Favorite moment in Rocket League history? It's AJ's end of question. I am very into Rocket League and Pro Rocket League, so this is not going to be fun for anybody who doesn't know anything about that. But if you want to look it up, the greatest series of all time, Furia versus Moist at the World Championships in 2022-23. Best series of all time. Let's move on and actually talk about Pacers basketball after a short little break. Need to quickly tell you guys about Prizepicks. Basketball season is heating up. There's no better way to get into real money action watching your favorite NBA stars than with Prizepicks. Whether you're a diehard fan or just love some friendly competition, Prizepicks makes it fun and easy to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. Here's how it works. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Think LeBron's going to drop 30 points? Maybe Luka's going to get more than 8 assists. Prizepicks lets you make your predictions, put your money where your mouth is in 60 seconds. You've been using all season. You've had lots of chances to have a blast, like picking Jason Tatum for more than 29 points. Anthony Edwards for more than 25. He does that a lot. This week coming up, you can use Prizepicks flex play options. So even if one of your picks doesn't hit, guess what? You can still double your money. And you can get, if you win, your money fast, as quick as 15 minutes. Now it's the perfect time to join. Download the Prizepicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you place your first $5 lineup. How about that? No need to win to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. Prizepicks, run your game. We are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Make your second listen. Lots of fun stuff going on in the NBA, but got to keep up with Jimmy Butler and the Heat on Locked On Heat. He is back from a suspension. He played against the Nuggets. They lost. Wow, shocker. The Nuggets, another team that they just have owned for years. But Locked On Heat will have the latest on that. Jimmy Butler playing in games again. I am kind of stunned it got to this point, but such is reality of the NBA. Ryan Knox at Cassie-Per, I hope I got that right, I'm sorry, says, how much practicing opportunity will the Pacers get during the Paris trip? The days off will be great for another few intense practice sessions, like the in-season tournament layoff, but if their schedule is packed with sightseeing and NBA-sponsored events, that may not be possible. I think it's actually a blend of what you've just described, right? To be clear about what the Paris games are, it's an NBA event, right? It's called like the NBA Paris games. Like last year it was the Cavs and the Nets. I think they only played one game. But regardless, they do lots of international games every year. Not lots. They do some international games every year. And it is an NBA event that the Pacers are participating in. So to make that clear, there will be lots of non-basketball stuff. I don't know what they are. I'm not going. But it's just going to be that way. Like there will be promotional stuff. Obviously, the Spurs and Wemby will be a bigger part of that, I'd have to imagine. But, they're not just like sitting around sightseeing for a week. But they also will practice, right? They need to practice because they'll have lots of time off. You can't get out of rhythm in the NBA, and they'll need time to practice because it's an NBA season and it's great to practice. And they will practice because I think there's going to be some like body timing acclimation element to this, right? Just based on the time the Pacers posted their takeoff flight pick for Paris, it was dark outside. I'd imagine smartly they left Sunday night so they could fly and sleep through the night, wake up Monday in Paris in the morning. And so, yes, you traveled at goofy times and your internal clock's a little messed up. At least you're not jet lagged when you wake up then, but they'll have to I think it's 6 hours, maybe 7, where if you're, let's pretend if you're a basketball player on the Pacers, you're used to practicing at 2 p.m., that's now way later in the day. That's 9 p.m. in Paris. So if you want to acclimate, you got to get up at 7 in Paris to do it at the normal time. So there's some blending going on to make that all reality as they play the games, and same coming out when they come back to the United States once they do that. So I certainly think they should and will do both things. I think they'll practice for both actual basketball reasons and internal basketball clock reasons. And I think they'll do lots of events, both for themselves promotionally, for the league promotionally, all sorts of stuff like that. And of course, play 2 games against the Spurs, which will be fun. We'll talk about those on this podcast, believe it or not. Bo McGinnis at Bo_McGinnis says, where does the Thomas Bryant trade rank in terms of impact when thinking about Pacers in-season trades in the last 20 years? That is a hilarious question. Who would have thought that that'd come a month after that trade? But it's worth talking about because that's what the Pacers, this front office, their best thing by far has been trades. I don't even think it's close in terms of like transactional things that a team can do. And they nailed this one, right? The worst case scenario is in 2031. The Pacers are the worst team in the league and the Heat are the best team in the league. And they give up pick 60 for pick 31. That's the worst case scenario. And then they get pick 60 anyway, right? The odds of that are absurd, obviously. And there's a chance that the Pacers are just better than the Heat then. And they give up literally nothing. They just got Thomas Bryant. And he's giving them like good backup center minutes right now. So I get why this trade happened. The Heat were way into the tax and they decreased their tax bill by doing this. And now Khalil Ware can play for them. And he's been playing pretty well. And like they didn't even know if they would keep Thomas Bryant. He opted out of a higher contract in the summer and took a minimum. Like there's just a lot of like, oh, okay, that's interesting kind of levels to this. And he wasn't playing that much. So great. They're willing to give him up, but he's playing better now than he basically has since he was with the Lakers. And you could even go back to before that, like with the Wizards, if you wanted. He's playing some of the best he's ever played. I think his rambunctious is the word I'm going to keep using now. Style fits the way the Pacers need him to play. Now, to actually answer the question, where does it rank in terms of impact and trades in the last 20 years? Okay, if I'm thinking about some of the best Pacers trades since I've been covering the team that have been in season, obviously number one is Siakam. I mean, that is at the top of the list. I'm going to look at their cap sheets through the years to see if I can find any names that leap off the page in front of me. Like a lot of their good midseason additions have been signings. For example, Wesley Matthews was a signing. A lot of the trades they make are primarily in the offseason. Tyreke Evans was a signing and in the offseason. They're not really an in-season trade-heavy team. That's kind of what made the Siakam deal very surprising when it happened. Karis LeVert was an in-season acquisition, barely into the season, but still an in-season acquisition. Well, I guess he didn't debut till much later in the season. So that could be one, I suppose. Jalen Smith was an in-season trade acquisition that turned out pretty good for the Pacers among the last couple of years. Obviously, Tyrese Haliburton was an in-season trade. I can't believe I forgot about that. Flipping through the years has made me realize that this stretch when they started rebuilding and they flipped stuff, yeah, there was a lot more. So Haliburton's number one. Siakam's number two. Thomas Bryant is not number three, but it's up there, right? Like a lot of stuff, a lot of midseason trades the Pacers have made are like, hey, we got 5 seconds. We're helping Jay Crowder go to, a different team, like that kind of stuff, right? And that's smart business. It's just they didn't get 5 seconds. There were 5 seconds exchanged in that trade. Regardless, that is primarily what they've done until the last couple years. And so in my time covering the team, Siakam and Haliburton are both midseason trades. Those are obviously 1 and 2. But also, like the Buddy Hield trade was shrewd. Maybe it made them a little worse, but I think they'll end up being okay from that. It definitely made them worse. Regardless, I can't really rank it without listing every trade of the last 20 years. Since I've been covering the team, it's probably in the top 10. I'm not going to lie, which says a lot about how well Thomas Bryant's been playing and how little they actually gave up to get him. But obviously, there's some good players in the team right now that rank very highly in that. Corey Hovius says, do you think the Pacers make any trades or stick with what they have? Good question. I mean, obviously, I just ran through a bunch of in-season trades that they made. They made some last year. They made some the year before. There are obviously reasons they could do it right now. I think that the primary thing that people should and will be thinking about, of course, besides the stuff that Rhett Bauer and I talked about last week on our trade deadline preview, is, Myles Turner is expiring. Ben Mathurin 2 years from now, his expiring, and he'll be extension eligible in 5 months from now, basically. So those are the players that should be top of mind for this stuff. And then James Wiseman, to me, most likely player to get traded, get off his salary would be very helpful for the Pacers. That said, the like theme of anything they do is kind of consolidation, right? And they're just hitting this now because of what just happened in the Philly game and stuff that's going to be talked about a lot. They have a lot of guys who are deserving of minutes. They've played very well in their time. It's not that they have to figure out who the worst of these guys have been. It's like going to be based on game flow and all sorts of stuff. But between the starting lineup they have and then a bench of McConnell, Shepard, McConnell, Shepard, Nesmith, Walker, Toppin, and Bryant, that's 11 guys. And they played 11 last game, but that's because Nesmith had a minutes restriction, and then they played Jarris Walker in the second half. How's that going to look when everybody's healthy? It's hard to say. If they could trade 2 for 1, great. That helps them solve a problem. The problem is People say it's, and Rick Carlisle even said this, like, it's great that they're healthy and have depth. That's true. He said, ask Nick Nurse about this. He made a good point by saying that. I would say a good problem to have is still a problem. It's a good problem, and all the solutions are good things. Great. We're playing 10 good players, and we have an 11th one who can ready to go. Like, that's all good. But consolidation is the natural follow-up to that. People asked about the Atlanta Hawks making a consolidation trade for years a couple years ago. They never really did it. They kind of did late in the process. But, like, that's what happens when you have a kind of good young team with lots of good players and young players that are talented, is you have to figure out who the minutes go to or how to do it. And so if they do something besides the obvious big three things I said with Mathurin, Turner, and Wiseman, and I suppose Jackson for similar reasons, being in the trade mix, I think if they can make a consolidation trade that upgrades the position they're consolidating, or like at least makes it neutral and they get an asset, they might do that, right? That would be something I think they would have to think about. Because of their salary situation, that's hard to do, right? They are in a tough spot to add money, and that's fine. They don't need to add money, but it does make trades harder. So if you ask me what I think, if I ask to directly answer the question, think the Pacers make any trade? Yes. I think they almost certainly try to shed some of their dead money off the books this year. But the actual question is, or stick with what they have. If you made me guess, I think the Pacers would have the same top 11 guys before and after the trade deadline. Their just financial situation makes it tough. And I think if they can, running out the rope, this isn't fun to say. Like, fans would hate this, but like running out the rope with the group they have this year, like if they do well again in the postseason, the proof of concept is there that like this core right now is good enough. Go for it right now. That'd be good information. If they lose in the first round, that's also good. Like, okay, this group's not good enough. They need to, you learn what you need to do and when. If this based off last year's result and what happens with this year's group, I don't think that's a bad thing. People will call it a waste of a year. I don't think so. Like, you have to find that information along the way. 2 more questions coming up to close out today's Locked On Pacers. Before we get to those, need to very quickly talk to you guys about FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets. How about that? If you win your first bet, there is $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That is on FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And we're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, let's see, the Brooklyn Nets got whopped 2 games in a row on their West Coast swing. What are they going to do with Cam Johnson? What are they going to do at all? Their season's been really strange. Well, the Locked On Nets guys can explain to you more about it. I think Cam Johnson, I talked about him in the Pacers a couple podcasts ago, like 2 weeks now, I would say. I think people are too eager to think about how that could resolve itself. Dennis Schroeder, they traded. Dorian Finney-Smith, they traded. Those guys are on expiring contracts. Cam Johnson's not. Obviously, he doesn't help the Nets to have him play, but they don't need to rush to trade him like they did with their other guys. Keep that in mind. Okay, 2 more questions today. One is from Brock Philbrun at the Boss 1196. Is Mathurin the obvious trade candidate at the deadline / offseason? Feels like he makes some bad decisions and the ball sticks when you get it. Not giving up on the potential, but questioning his fit with the other starters. That is the question with him forever. His fit. The talent is obvious, like you said. Very few guys can score like him at his age. Nobody basically got to the free throw line at his age the way he did his rookie season. Clearly something there. Good player at that kind of stuff. Great player at that kind of stuff. He's working on the rest of the important skills in the NBA, catch and shoot, quick decisions, team defense. But he's gotten much better at them in this recent stretch, and that's a big part of the starting 5 playing better beyond Andrew Nembhard's return, is Mathurin playing much better at all that kind of team-level stuff. And so he's started the blend of what he needs to be for them to win and what he can be at his best. That said, your question still is very relevant because of what you said, the offseason coming when he becomes extension eligible. How do you price out what that player is? The player that he was when he was just whopping for the Pacers, looked great. And the team was winning at their most, was more like a 3-and-D type, or like a scorer and D type, I guess. I don't really know what to call it. And it wasn't perfect defense along the way. It was a little inconsistent. Like, what's that player worth versus the theory of like, if he's Jalen Green and he's like a high level scorer, but they don't need him to be that like the Rockets do because of the rest of the Pacers team. So what he's going to want and what he should get might be very off. I don't know. There's a lot of information the Pacers still need there, but it does make him at least something they have to think about, right? And they have lots of guards anyway. I don't think they should be trying to trade Ben Mathurin right now, but when you get to extension times, that becomes part of their trade value. Think about that with Josh Giddey, for example, this past summer. So I think they should try to continue to find the right role for him to blend being Ben Mathurin, oh wow level scorer, and being Ben Mathurin, they need you to be this guy for the Pacers, where Tyrese Haliburton and Pascal Siakam have the ball. There is a middle ground where he's very good, and he's had a lot of those games in the last month. It's all about consistency now, and then pushing forward with what that player is. Because like early in the season, he was one of their best, if not the best, offensive player some nights. But there's certainly those fit questions will be why they have to think about his future all the time. And that's not to say that future does not involve being with the Pacers. That's just to say they have to think about what it is in terms of role, in terms of money, all that kind of stuff. So is he the obvious candidate at the trade deadline or offseason? No, I don't think he's the obvious candidate, but I think he's one guy they'll have to think about in those kind of discussions of sorting out the final pieces. That one's going to be hard to really break down when that time comes. Last one comes from Rooster at Rooster Bra, I think 812. I should have had that up. Yes, that is correct. Okay. Who says, first of all, I do these by tweeting, hey, ask me some mailbag questions. And when I get enough, I delete the tweet so that no one can reply anymore, because then I just get too many and I can't answer them all. So Rooster was trying to reply when I deleted the tweet and sent me a message. So that counts. That counts as getting it in time. He says, assuming the Pacers re-sign Myles Turner for, let's say, 4 years, $100 million, and extend Mathurin, how far into the tax will they be? And do they have bird rights if they want to re-sign Thomas Bryant? The latter one's easy. They will have non-bird rights on Thomas Bryant, which allows them to give him a 120% raise on his current contract. As good as Thomas Bryant's been playing, there's a lot of centers. Like Moses Brown was just like available midseason, and you can very clearly see the difference between Thomas Bryant and Moses Brown. But in the offseason, when none of those backup centers are on a team, you can get good backup centers for the minimum. So I'm not sure if he does this the whole rest of the season and really clearly fits with the Pacers better than anyone else, maybe he'd fetch more in the minimum, but I'm not sure Thomas Bryant's going to be more in the minimum player in the summer. We'll get back to that in June. But they'll have non-bird rights, which lets them give him a 4-year deal that starts at a deal that's up to 4 years in length and starts at 120% of his salary, of 120% of next year's minimum salary. So that's definitely enough to keep him in their over the cap situation. As for the first question, if they sign Myles for, 4 for 100, I've been guessing 3 for 75, 3 for 80, something in that range. If they keep him, I'll just use a flat $25 million just for the sake of some math here. And then they keep Mathurin. How far into the tax would they be? Great question. You know what I'm going to use here? What would a Mathurin extension look like? I'm going to use a similar number, like 4 for 100-ish. And in fact, the exact number I'm going to use is his qualifying offer for 2026-27, which is $27,500,000. So maybe a little over 4 for 100. If they kept Turner at $25 million and then retained Mathurin at that salary, they would be under the tax entering that offseason with 12 players. Part of the reason that would be possible is because of 10% cap growth every year, plus a flat salary for Aaron Nesmith, plus slow salary growth for Obi Toppin, plus not a huge salary jump for Andrew Nembhard. And then in theory, Thomas Bryant and James Johnson would be gone. James Wiseman would in theory be a free agent by then. So actually 4 open roster spots. Isaiah Jackson could be a free agent by then. Ben Shepherd will be in the last year of his deal. So of the 10 players that I just said, their salary would sum up to, I'm trying to make sure I got this right. It's kind of hard to do this with a microphone in my hand because I'm summing up lots of stuff around different spots. They would have $225 million of guaranteed salaries. The luxury tax that year, $206.6 million. So $19 million over the tax with 5 roster spots to fill. You can do the math on what that kind of would look like or how that could work out. And maybe they're willing to do that. I don't know if they should be or would be, but such is life for the Pacers. Things are going to be fascinating for them in the next couple of years because of all these things. I have no idea what Mathurin's contract should look like or Myles Turner's next contract should look like, although I have my guesses. We'll see. But yes, I have them well over the luxury tax 2 years from now if they keep both those guys. Keep that in mind as the trade deadline's approaching as well. Good question. Good questions from everybody. This week will be interesting because it's not your typical regular season week, just like the NBA Cup week when we did lots of shows in a row. Tomorrow, Jeremiah Johnson's going to join us, Pacers sideline reporter, talk about the Pacers at the halfway point, their turnaround, how they got to this point of looking better, all sorts of stuff about the team this year. Wednesday, we'll do, instead of best duos, best trios, and then I'll run 2 more interviews I've done with Pacers / Madden / locals guys. Thursday, another guest will come talk about Pacers in Paris, a little bit of Pacers Spurs, and then we'll be back to normal. And then next week, it'll be back to finding a little bit of time between games because they play Thursday. We'll do a podcast after that. Then they play Saturday, do a podcast after that. And they don't play till Wednesday. So I'll have like 3 more to get to. So lots of very unique, let's say, discussions where they only play twice in the next 10 days. But that's a good thing in theory for their rest. That's a bad thing for their rhythm that they're in a different continent. Alas, we'll see how this all goes. Thank you all for listening today. I hope you guys enjoyed the answers to these questions that I thought of mostly on the spot. Back tomorrow, talking some Pacers. You can find me on Twitter at Tony R. East, and this podcast is there at Locked On Pacers. That's where I tweet these prompts for mailbag questions. I'm also on Blue Sky at Tony R. East. I did mailbag there once. Thank you all for listening. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you very soon.